Today we are weaving on paper. Now, when you are weaving, there are three really important vocabulary words involved. The first one is loom. A loom is what holds your weaving together. It's sturdy. In this case, we are doing this with paper, so we're going to have a piece of paper be our loom. But if you are weaving with fabric, you would use something maybe wooden, and this wooden frame would hold your strings together as you are weaving. Now, the strings that go on your loom are called warp strands. Now, warp strands are the strands that go up and down vertically on your loom, and they're usually pulled very tight if you are using a loom to make something like a blanket or fabric. In this case, our warp strands are actually made by cutting slits in our paper. Now, the last thing that you need is a weft strand. Now, the weft strands are strands that go horizontally across your loom. So let's go ahead and do this together, and we should already have our loom ready to go. Let's go ahead and start our paper weaving by going under and over with our weft strands and our warp strands. So I've got a lot of really thin cut pieces of paper that are going to be used to do this weaving today, and I've got my loom ready to go. I folded it in half and cut these slits into the paper so that I have my own warp strands that I can weave into. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to use your warp strands and kind of loosen them up, and then you're going to find your weft strands and decide which color you would like to use first. We're going to be going up and over and under, over and under. I'm going to go ahead and pick my first weft strand. Now you could start by going under, over. It does not matter. I'm just going to do over first. So I'm going to go ahead and go over my first one, and then I'm going to lift up the second one to go under the second one. And I'm going to make sure that I do this in a pattern. And I'm checking to make sure I have a pattern here. So over, under the next one, checking over, under, over, under. I'm going to go over this one, under the next one by lifting up, over that one, and then under my last one. So as you can see, it's sticking out the edge, and that is okay. I'm checking, and I have all of my warp strands accounted for. I went over, under the whole thing, and the next thing I'm going to do is slide it on down to the bottom, and it's going to start getting nice and tight as I keep going. So this is very important for the next part. When we do our next strand, I'm using yellow. I am not going to do the same thing I did last time. If I do the same thing and go over, under, you'll see here that they just kind of flop around in there, and they are not snug at all. I need to make sure they are nice and snug so that if I'm making a shirt with fabric, I don't have holes. And if I'm making a roof for a house, for example, there's no way there's going to be rain coming through my roof. So what I need to do is do the opposite. If I went over it, I gotta go under it this time. So I went over it, I'm gonna go under it this time. So I'm gonna go under, over, under, lift up that warp strand and go under it. I'm gonna go over, under, over, under, over. Now, does that look right? Let's check my pattern. I've got over, under, under. Something does not look quite right here. I think I skipped one of my warp strands. That is okay. If something looks off to you, what you're going to do is you're going to pull that weft strand backwards and go beep, 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 back to where it looks like it's right, and then check. Okay, so I went under that black. Now I need to go over the next black and under that second to last warp strand that I missed last time. Lastly, I'm going to go over the last one, and there we go. That looks much better. Now I'm going to push it down, make it nice and snug in my loom, and I've got a checkerboard pattern starting to appear. I'm getting really excited now, so I'm going to keep going. I've got my blue, and last time we went under our black warp strand, so now we need to make sure we go over it. I can't go under it, I gotta go over it so it's nice and snug in my loom. So I'm gonna go ahead and lift up the next one, over, under, all the way across, and I'm gonna keep going with all of my warp strands, or all of my weft strands, and push them down as I go to make sure they are nice and tight. So I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward for you here. Alright guys, I am on my last weft strand, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to push all of my other ones down a little bit so that they fit nice and snug down there, and I think I'm going to have room. So let's push down this blue, and I actually have room for 2 if I wanted to add another one. So I'm going to go ahead and go over, under on my last weft strand here, and it is looking super cool, and it feels very tight and very sturdy. All right, so I am finished weaving, and I am going to do one last step once I am totally finished. And if you need to take a break and come back to this, if it's taking you a while, that's fine. But the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a glue stick and just kind of glue down all of those ends on the front. I'm lifting them up and gluing them down. Let's fast forward there. Now that I've done all of them on the top, I'm actually going to flip it over, and I can do the same thing on the back. And one thing I'm noticing as I'm doing this is that this reminds me so much of my mom's cherry pie that she used to make. So I'm going to put that up on the screen for you here. Sometimes people who make pies will do what's called a lattice on the crust, and they will actually weave on the crust of their pie. So if you ever notice that at the next family gathering you go to, make sure you tell them that you know how to weave too, and they'll be very impressed. And if you ever decide to, get into baking, you'll know how to do that as well. Now, when you do a pie or any type of weaving, you will have these kind of extras hanging off the side. And the last step is just to put the cap on your glue stick and grab yourself some scissors and cut those extra pieces off. Once you cut all of those extra pieces off, you have your finished weaving, and it looks so cool. It's amazing. There's so many variations you could do with this project. You could turn this into really anything from here. You could just make it like a little rug. You could do this with string and make a pouch. So next time I see you, we're actually going to be turning this into a house, and I can't wait to show you.